You ever get that feeling like there's this hidden struggle going on, something under the surface shaping, well, everything?
Oh, definitely. It's like an unseen current.
Exactly. And our source today, Pietro Ubaldi's The Great Battle, it just dives right into that.
And it really does. Ubaldi talks about this ongoing great battle, but it's not fought with tanks or anything.
Right.
It's more a struggle within us, within human nature, a kind of contest based on like knowledge and goodness. It's a fascinating way to look at things, both personally and, societally.
Absolutely. And Ubaldi, he's upfront about it. He wants to analyze us, human behavior, using rational thought, but grounded in biology. He's not just floating abstract ideas.
Yeah, he's trying to be very grounded.
So our mission here, for you listening, is to really unpack this great battle. We want to get a handle on these two types he talks about, the evolved and the involuted, and figure out how their friction, their conflict, affects us every day.
And it's important, I think, right off the bat, to say Ubaldi isn't just slapping labels on people, like good or bad.
Good point.
He's talking about them as almost biological types, distinct ways of being. He suggests they have fundamentally different instincts, different ways of acting, even understanding life itself. He says they can be at antipodes, which is, wow, a strong way to put it.
Okay, at antipodes. Let's dig into that. The involuted type, what does Ubaldi say really defines them?
Well, in Ubaldi's framework, the involuted are mainly running on instinct. Think basic survival drives.
Like animal instinct almost?
Pretty much, yeah. Self-preservation, the whole law of the strongest idea. He argues that things like ethics, laws, those are basically outside forces we've created to try and, manage those deep-seated drives. Discipline from the outside.
Right. Okay. So focused on immediate needs, those primal instincts lead the way. How does the evolved person differ then, biologically speaking?
The big difference. Self-awareness. The evolved individual knows about their instincts. They're aware of them.
Ah.
And that awareness means they can actually direct those impulses, not just react. Ubaldi talks about this journey towards greater spiritualization, developing an ethical consciousness from within. He thinks that's absolutely key for like a future unified humanity.
So the evolved have that internal compass, a sense of responsibility beyond just themselves.
That's it, exactly. And that's where the conflict really kicks in, right?
Yeah.
You've got these two fundamentally different approaches just coexisting.
In the same society.
Yeah. The past, which is the involuted way, and the future, the evolved way, are constantly bumping heads, each trying to kind of impose its own logic on things. It's a clash you see playing out everywhere.
That really paints a picture. Now, Ubaldi says society right now is in a sort of median position, a compromise. What does that actually look like?
He suggests that our social norms, our laws, our general way of doing things are mostly shaped by this middle ground. It's adapted to the majority, who he figures are somewhere between those two poles.
Makes sense.
It's a system trying to juggle both the raw instincts and the more conscious, ethical side. But, well, you can see it doesn't always work perfectly, does it? Leads to constant tension and debate.
Yeah, you can definitely see that. So if this great battle isn't about armies and weapons, what's actually being fought over? What's at stake?
Good question. Ubaldi is clear it's not mainly about grabbing wealth or power, though those things can get involved, obviously. Sure. He frames it as something much deeper, a fight between, he uses these big terms, angel and beast, light and darkness, spirit and matter, even the gospel of Christ versus the egoism of the world.
Wow.
The ultimate goal, though, in his view, improvement, happiness for humanity.
So it's a battle for the soul of humanity, almost, the direction we're heading.
You could put it that way, yeah. And he insists this isn't just philosophy. You can see it
How so?
in how people act, how they approach life, their interactions. He actually encourages people, listeners, to do some self-observation. Where do your tendencies lean? It's about recognizing these forces inside you and around you.
That's powerful, turning it inward. Ubaldi also brings up these superior individuals throughout history. How do they fit in?
He sees them as kind of embodying the evolved potential. Think figures in religion, art, science, philosophy. They represent the ideals that pull humanity forward.
Like signposts.
Exactly, like beacons showing the way. They planted seeds for the future, representing what humans can be. Someone who, say, argued for reason over impulse, even when it was unpopular. That's the kind of figure he means.
And the core of this whole struggle, he says, is that transition, moving from being involuted to evolved, which sounds potentially difficult.
Oh, definitely painful, he suggests. It's that tough climb from our more basic nature towards being truly civilized and humane.
And that transition, it's not smooth sailing, is it?
Not at all. It's often full of conflict. Conflict within ourselves as we wrestle with these different parts, and conflict out in the world as different value systems inevitably clash.
Okay, let's get more specific. The involuted individual, how do they typically see the world, according to Ubaldi?
He describes their view as basically egocentric. They're the center of their own universe, right? And so they naturally struggle to genuinely empathize or prioritize others' needs. It's all about me, and others are kind of viewed in relation to how they help or hinder me.
Okay. And how does someone more evolved feel living in a world that seems dominated by that perspective?
Ubaldi uses the term misfit. Like they feel out of place, born into a world that doesn't quite mesh with their inner values.
I can imagine that.
Their leanings towards connection, towards broader ethics, can make them feel like an outsider when everyone else seems driven by self-interest. It's like speaking a different language almost.
That feeling of not fitting in. Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to that on some level. What about the evolved person's natural tendencies? What drives them?
They're pulled towards what Ubaldi calls higher spiritual values. They have this innate sense of being connected to others, to the world.
So less about me.
Much less. Their identity isn't just their ego. It's wider, more holistic. Their motivation comes more from wanting the whole system, the whole group to thrive, not just themselves.
Feels like a completely different operating system. Okay, how about maintaining order? Social structure. How did the two types approach that?
The involuted, relying more on instinct, tend to need external controls. Laws, rules, punishments.
Like consequences are key.
Exactly. Enforced compliance from the outside. Think speed limits. Most people follow them because of the risk of getting caught, right?
Yeah, makes sense given the focus on those immediate drives. And the evolved.
To the evolved, ideally it's about internal principles. They've absorbed that ethical framework.
So they don't need the threat?
Not in the same way. Their own sense of right and wrong is the main guide. That internal compass keeps them in line.
A really stark contrast. Internal compass versus external rules. Ubaldi also mentioned some less positive traits linked to the involuted state. Exploitation, hypocrisy.
Yeah, he suggests that in that state, there's more potential for exploiting others for personal gain. And hypocrisy, too, like saying you believe in high ideals but acting selfishly behind the scenes.
I'm looking on a show.
Kind of. Wanting to look good without doing the actual inner work. It's the appearance over the genuine substance.
And how does the evolved person contrast with that?
Ubaldi paints them as ideally sincere. He suggests that in a more trusting, supportive environment, where showing vulnerability doesn't mean you get attacked, sincerity is just easier, more natural.
Because you don't have to protect yourself in the same way.
Exactly. There's less gap between their inner values and how they act outwardly.
Let's zoom out a bit to the big picture evolution.
Yeah.
How does Ubaldi see evolution itself playing into these two types?
He sees evolution pushing humanity away from what he calls the animalistic anti-system.
Anti-system, okay.
And towards a more spiritual integrated system. This system is built on things like unity, collaboration, love the stuff that resonates with the evolved mindset.
And the involuted, are they just left behind in this process? What's their role?
No, he sees them as the essential starting point, the raw material. Initially, it's all about survival of the fittest, right? But through life, through challenges, even through suffering, that raw quantity of life starts transforming into quality. Vital energy slowly refines into thought, and eventually maybe into spiritual understanding. Their struggles aren't pointless in the long run.
So the harshness of that involuted world actually serves a developmental purpose. It's not just chaos.
That's his perspective, yeah. He describes that world operating on might makes right. Victory justifies the means. Self-defense is critical because everyone might seem like an enemy. Looking out for number one is the main rule.
And the evolved vision, this system, what does that look like societally?
It leans towards collectivism. He talks about an organic state where individuals work together for the good of the whole.
Like organs in a body.
Exactly like that. Collaboration and mutual support are the bedrock.
You mentioned religion earlier. How does Ubaldi see religion fitting into this whole dynamic?
He views it as this recurring attempt by humanity to lift itself up, to aim for that more evolved state.
An attempt.
Yes, but he's realistic. These attempts often get compromised because, well, the involuted tendencies are still so strong in most people. The original message might be profound, but it gets filtered through a more self-serving lens in practice.
Yeah, you can see that throughout history. Now, this idea of reverse morality, that sounds really intriguing. Can you break that down?
It's fascinating, isn't it? The idea is that the same words, The same actions can mean completely different things depending on your perspective, evolved or involuted.
How so? Give me an example.
Okay, take law. For the evolved person, law is about order, collective benefit, helping society function smoothly. For the involuted, that same law might just be seen as the rules imposed by the winner, something to get around or use for your own advantage if you can.
Wow, so the intention behind it totally flicks its meaning. Okay, let's talk sacrifice and suffering. Why do evolved people sometimes seem out of step or even face hardship?
Because their values caring for others, thinking long-term can clash hard with the immediate self-interest that often drives an involuted world.
So they look naive.
Or idealistic or weak, yeah. And because of that clash, they can be misunderstood, even persecuted. Ubaldi uses Christ as a major example, someone incredibly evolved who faced martyrdom in a world not ready for him.
So their goodness can actually look like a liability in that kind of environment.
In the short term, absolutely. But Ubaldi argues their suffering isn't wasted. It pushes evolution forward, acts as a catalyst, inspires others, even if it takes time. Their example ripples outwards.
It's like a long game strategy, even if it costs them personally.
You could see it that way. It's about the larger arc.
And why do the involuted often struggle to understand or even oppose the evolved? Is it just fear?
It's partly that their whole way of thinking is different. From a might makes right view, altruism can look like foolishness, or even a threat.
They just don't have the framework.
Exactly. They lack the internal structure to really grasp those higher motivations. It just doesn't compute sometimes.
But Ubaldi does say the evolved have their own kind of strength, right? It's
Right.
not just about being martyrs.
Definitely. It's not brute force or manipulation. It's a strength that comes from inner order, from genuine altruism, from being connected to something larger, what he calls higher spiritual forces. It's quieter, maybe, but ultimately more resilient, more impactful in the long run.
Okay, so looking ahead, what's the ultimate goal of this whole process, this great battle, according to Ubaldi?
He sees it as the eventual triumph of life, the evolved system over death, the anti-system. It's a path towards more unity, more cooperation, towards love being the main operating principle for humanity.
And what's the job of the evolved individuals in making that happen?
Ubaldi sees them as having this, like, biological function almost, to help lift up the involuted, even if they face resistance.
How do they do that?
Their presence, their actions, they act like a kind of pull, showing a different way as possible, nudging humanity forward, and demonstrating those evolved principles.
So they lead by example even when it's tough.
Yeah.
Evolutionary pioneers.
That's a great way to put it. Pioneers, yeah. Leading by living those principles. And Ubaldi believes real progress means shifting away from force towards justice. Protecting the vulnerable becomes more important. Ultimately, he says, understanding this whole dynamic, its great battle inside us and out in the world, that's vital for our own growth and for, well, all of us moving towards a better future.
Wow. This has been really illuminating. A deep dive into Ubaldi's great battle, for sure. The main takeaway seems to be this constant, often hidden tension between two basic ways of being.
Yeah, fundamentally different ways.
One rooted in self-interest, instinct, the involuted. The other driven by connection, consciousness, empathy, the evolved.
Exactly. And it really makes you think, doesn't it? Where do you fit in this picture? Where do your motivations really come from? Is it mostly those basic drives? Or are you consciously trying to live by those more evolved principles? Collaboration, looking out for the whole.
It definitely puts a new lens on the conflicts we see everywhere. Is all that friction just part of this evolutionary climb?
It's a challenging thought.
And maybe the biggest question for everyone listening is, what part can you play? How can you personally help nudge things towards that more evolved state in your own life and your interactions? Maybe digging into Ubaldi more or just reflecting on your own values. That could be the start of navigating this very personal great battle.